They humiliated a single mom and an autistic man, but what happened next stopped the room cold. It began as a moment of cruelty in a small cafe, a crowd laughing at the wrong people, believing weakness looked quiet. But by the end, their silence would rewrite everything they thought they knew about kindness, intelligence, and love. Stay until the last second, because this story doesn't just surprise you, it changes how you see people forever. Emma walked through the fog-swept streets of a small town in Oregon, her old sneakers brushing against cracked sidewalks glistening from early rain. She balanced 2 grocery bags that felt heavier than usual, though they only held milk, cereal, and a discounted loaf of bread. Her fingers ached, not from weight, but from worry. Every coin spent was a quiet battle between feeding her son and saving enough to pay the electric bill. The dim streetlights hummed softly, and their flicker reminded her of nights when life used to feel steady, before everything broke. In the passenger seat sat Liam, staring out the window of the faded car with that distant look that frightened Emma sometimes. His hands moved in gentle circles over his lap, small, repetitive motions that calmed him when the world grew too loud. She often wondered what he saw out there in his quiet world, what colors or shapes filled the silence between them. The radio whispered an old song, and with every note, she fought the ache of memories she never spoke aloud. They reached home, a small second-floor apartment that smelled faintly of lemon soap and hope. Emma's shoes squeaked on the tile as she unpacked groceries. Liam set his backpack neatly by the door, as he always did, then crouched on the floor, lining up cereal boxes in perfect alignment. Routine gave him peace, and for a moment, Emma smiled. The rhythm of ordinary things, the hum of the fridge, the rain tapping against glass, was all they had to hold their world together. Yet underneath that fragile calm, something restless stirred. Emma's boss had hinted that morning that cleaning hours might be cut. The new assistant manager didn't think part-timers with family obligations were reliable. That word, unreliable, echoed relentlessly in her mind. She'd heard it before from her ex-husband, from teachers who misunderstood Liam, from relatives who believed their love was nothing more than charity dressed as patience. It wasn't true. But the human brain, she knew, doesn't forget the sound of judgment. It records tone before meaning. Every cruel word burrows deep, replaying in tiny echoes when silence grows too thick. Emma dried her hands on a dish towel and looked at Liam, who was humming to himself while drawing patterns on the fogged window. Patterns. Always patterns. "You okay, baby?" she asked softly. He nodded but didn't turn around. It wasn't a lie. It was his way of saying not yet. Morning came too soon. Sunlight seeped through threadbare curtains, drawing thin lines of gold across Liam's face. He sat at the small kitchen table, spooning cereal with careful precision. Emma stared at his profile, at the quiet concentration in his eyes, and wondered what other mothers saw when their sons ate breakfast. Pride, fear. For her, it was both. A beautiful contradiction she carried like oxygen. It felt fragile, temporary, like breathing through glass. The car engine growled reluctantly as they left for the day. Emma worked 2 houses before noon, scrubbing marble floors that reflected chandeliers she could never afford. The smell of bleach clung to her skin. Between cleaning rooms, she checked her phone, 2 missed calls from Liam's school. Her heart tensed, as if a string had been pulled too tight. When she finally answered, the voice on the other end didn't sound angry. It sounded tired, and that, somehow, was worse. By the time she reached the school, the halls were empty except for Liam, sitting alone near the office, his backpack open on the floor. His notebook was missing. The teacher explained, in a tone dripping with polite discomfort, that another student had borrowed it, laughing at his odd drawings of numbers and spirals. Emma crouched beside her son, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. His face was blank, too calm, the kind of calm that hides storms beneath. That evening, after dinner, she found a replacement notebook for him. Cheap paper, soft cover. Liam didn't complain. He sat at his small desk, writing furiously, page after page. She watched him with quiet awe. His focus was breathtaking, the kind only children who feel different develop, like survival instinct wrapped in discipline. Curiosity tugged at her, but she didn't ask what he was writing. Sometimes love means not needing every answer. Later that week, she took Liam to a nearby cafe after work, a small place that smelled like cinnamon and warmth. He liked watching the coffee steam dance upward, tracing invisible shapes with his fingers. Emma allowed herself a rare moment of peace, ordering 2 hot chocolates. But the world often finds ways to bruise serenity. The laughter started softly, from a table behind them, but her heart recognized cruelty long before her ears did. Whispered jokes, then giggles, about him. They said he wasn't right, that maybe he should be kept at home. Simple words, dressed as jokes, but they sliced through Emma's chest like cold wind. She froze, her smile faltering. Liam didn't look up. His hands still traced the steam. The awareness hit her. He knew. Children like him always knew when the air changed. They feel energy more than language, tone more than meaning. Her throat closed, yet her silence screamed at the unfairness of a world that mocks what it cannot understand. Time slowed. The cafe's soft music faded into distant echoes. Emma wanted to stand, to defend him, but Liam turned and looked at her, not scared, not angry, just calm. That calm frightened her more than any insult could. He whispered, almost to himself, "It's okay, Mom. They don't know yet." Yet. The softness of that word pierced deeper than revenge ever could. Then he turned back toward his cup and kept tracing invisible numbers in the air. Emma's breath trembled. She reached for his hand under the table. Small, warm, steady. He squeezed back once, grounding her. She didn't notice that the cafe owner, quietly watching from the counter, had seen everything. Something in his eyes changed. A mix of shame and realization that words can wound louder than screams. He wiped his hands on a towel, hesitating, torn between comfort and cowardice. Humans rarely choose kindness first. We choose safety. But guilt has sharp teeth. The laughter faded, replaced by an uneasy silence heavy enough to bend air. Emma lifted her gaze slowly, not with anger, but with quiet strength. Somewhere deep inside, a new resolve formed, not the fiery kind that seeks revenge, but the gentle steel that decides this ends here. She didn't know what would come next, what tomorrow would bring, but she sensed Liam did. He always seemed to, long before anyone else. And as they stood to leave, Liam picked up his notebook from the table, opened it briefly, and wrote something before walking to the counter. The cafe owner glanced down when Liam handed it to him, a polite gesture of thanks. Then Liam smiled, the softest, rarest smile. Emma didn't see what was written, but the man's expression told her it wasn't simple. Something began to shift in that moment, quietly, like the first tremor before a storm no one expects. Before the cafe door closed behind them, the man stood reading the notebook's first page, eyes widening as his hands began to shake. Something extraordinary hid within those lines, a secret that would soon change everything he and the others thought they knew about empathy, intelligence, and the quiet power of grace. What do you think Liam wrote on that page that made the man freeze like that? Put your thoughts below in the comments. I'd love to read them. Emma couldn't sleep that night. The wind whispered through the broken seal of her window, carrying faint city sounds, tires on wet asphalt, a siren fading far away, a dog barking without reason. She sat at the edge of her bed, her mind circling the image of the cafe owner's face when he read Liam's notebook. Fear and awe had lived in his eyes at once, as if he'd glimpsed something holy and impossible hiding behind a child's quiet innocence. But what frightened Emma most was that Liam never said what he wrote, and she didn't ask. Morning sunlight spilled across the kitchen table like gold dust on wood that once belonged to a stronger home. Liam sat eating toast, calm as always, humming softly while drawing shapes in the condensation on his glass. Circles, always circles. When Emma leaned closer, she realized they weren't random. They repeated with perfect spacing, following a rhythm only he seemed to understand. She whispered his name and asked what the pattern meant. He hesitated, then simply said, "You'll see." At work that day, Emma cleaned the wealthy home of the Parker family on the other side of town, a sprawling house with hallways longer than her entire apartment. The tiles shone like mirrors, forcing her to look at herself over and over, a repetition that narrowed her chest. She thought about quitting, about finding a job closer to Liam's school, but no one hires people like her easily. Single mothers with quiet children and unpredictable schedules belong to the bottom of waitlists and the back of judgment. When her shift ended, Emma checked her phone. A single text waited. "Please come to the cafe when you can. Mr. Graham." Her stomach tightened. For the rest of the walk, her thoughts ran in uneven steps. Had something happened? Did Liam forget something there? Or worse, had he offended someone without meaning to? Anxiety hummed between her ribs, steady and suffocating. Every mother of a misunderstood child carries that fear. The next misunderstanding could cost everything. When she entered the cafe, the afternoon light painted dust grains in midair like floating secrets. The place was quiet, emptier than usual. Mr. Graham stood behind the counter, a notebook in his hands, Liam's. His face looked pale, eyes rimmed with sleepless curiosity. "Mrs. Hale," he started gently, "your son, he's special." Emma froze, bracing for pity disguised as kindness, the tone she'd heard too many times before. But this felt different. There was reverence in his voice. He opened the notebook slightly so she could see the pages. Numbers filled them, lines intersecting in elegant symmetry, each equation flowing into the next, like music written in logic instead of sound. "I showed this to a friend who's a math professor," Mr. Graham said quietly. He said parts of it looked like projected patterns of market behavior, predictive math. "But your son's only 16, right?" Her throat tightened. She nodded, uncertain whether to feel pride or dread. That night, long after they returned home, Emma sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the notebook resting beside a small lamp. The pages whispered secrets her eyes couldn't decode, but her heart sensed purpose. Liam slept in his room, breathing slow, peaceful. She wanted to protect him from a world that rewards loud brilliance and punishes quiet genius. Yet something inside her whispered that maybe protecting him too much would be another kind of harm. The next day brought whispers at the cafe. Word spread quickly in small towns. Mystery travels faster than truth. People came in pretending to buy coffee but stayed longer, glancing toward Emma and Liam when they arrived. Curiosity has its own scent. It mixes fascination with hidden malice. Liam seemed unaware, or maybe he was beyond their gaze. He sat quietly with his notebook, while Emma tried to ignore the stares that stripped her dignity in polite silence. Then the laughter returned. A man in a suit, the same one who'd mocked them before, walked in with two friends. "Hey, numbers boy," he called out, his tone casual but sharp. "Solve this. How much is a latte if I have zero respect?" His friends chuckled. The cafe owner looked up, ready to intervene, but froze when Liam turned his head calmly, his expression unreadable. The space between his glance and his words became unbearable. Liam didn't answer the insult. He just asked quietly, "Do you know what patterns mean?" The man frowned. "They mean repetition," Liam said softly, "and repetition means failure to learn." The words didn't sound rehearsed. They sounded ancient, like a truth remembered rather than spoken. The laughter stopped. Emma's heart pounded. Mr. Graham watched in stunned silence, his fingers tightening around a clean cup as if afraid it might shatter. Everyone in the room expected a sharp reply from the man, but instead, he grinned awkwardly, brushing it off with a shrug. "Kid's got a mouth on him," he muttered, pretending indifference. The others went quiet, pretending not to see the shift that had entered the air. Emma sensed something building beneath the surface, an invisible tide gathering strength. Not anger, but something slower, deeper, inevitable. Later, outside the cafe, Emma asked softly, "Why did you say that, Liam?" He looked at her with that rare, distant focus that both comforted and scared her. "Because he repeats," Liam said simply, and I had to break the pattern. His tone carried no pride, only clarity. Emma stared at him, realizing that beneath his calm lived an understanding far older than his years, a quiet rebellion shaped like kindness. That night, as rain began again, Emma found herself rereading one page from Liam's notebook. Among the equations, a sentence appeared, small, almost hidden among the numbers. "The moment they laugh is the moment I learn their rhythm." She didn't understand what it meant, not yet. But she felt something cold, something profound, settling in her chest, whispering that Liam was already seeing the world in ways most people never could. And deep inside that certainty, an unease began to grow. A sense that the notebook's numbers weren't just numbers, and whatever came next would test not only their endurance, but the very meaning of compassion itself. Days folded quietly into one another, the way paper bends before it tears. Emma started noticing small things. How neighbors who barely acknowledged her before now paused to greet her. How unfamiliar faces appeared outside the cafe, pretending to admire pastries while glancing at Liam. Whispers had a strange rhythm. They carried curiosity wrapped in envy, fascination dressed as admiration. She wondered if attention always came at the cost of peace. Liam didn't seem disturbed, but she noticed him writing more furiously each night, as though trying to capture thoughts before they escaped. At school, things began shifting too. Teachers spoke to her in that odd tone reserved for uncomfortable admiration. "He's brilliant," one said, her smile sharp around the edges. "But some of the students are unsettled." Emma understood the coded language. Different makes others uneasy. Liam's calm and precision, once viewed as weakness, now sparked a blend of respect and fear. He never answered the teasing. He simply watched, listened, and sometimes smiled at something invisible. A melody only he could hear. One afternoon, Emma returned to the cafe after work to find a crowd around the front window. Something was happening inside. Voices raised, phones recording. She pushed the door open, her pulse quickening. At the center stood Liam, his notebook open on a table, chalk dust on his fingers. Someone had given him the cafe's blackboard. The same man who once mocked him now stood beside him, visibly tense. Liam's steady voice drifted through the room. "This isn't about numbers. It's about balance." The blackboard looked like chaos. Numbers, shapes, arrows connecting unpredictably. But every few seconds, a pattern formed, elegant and haunting, only to disappear when Liam added more. Each shift drew small gasps from the audience. He wasn't performing. He was translating something unseen. "When you watch patterns," he said quietly, "you start hearing the truth behind words." Behind him, Mr. Graham stood frozen, his hands clasped, as if he were hearing a sermon disguised as math. Emma's heart pounded with fierce pride and silent dread. She wanted to stop him, to protect him from their eyes, but something stronger kept her still. The cafe felt like a heartbeat, suspense rising and falling in waves. Liam turned toward the man beside him. "You wanted to know if I could solve something," he said softly. "Here." He pointed to a number scrawled near the edge of the board. "That's your cafe's sales today, $486.15. Murmurs filled the air. Mr. Graham blinked, pale. "That's right." Gasps rippled through the room. Phones tilted higher, recording. The air brimmed with something unexplainable, a mingling of disbelief and reverence. Emma saw her son becoming less of a boy and more of an enigma in their eyes. That terrified her. People crave what they don't understand, but they also destroy it when curiosity turns to fear. Liam looked around calmly, noticing everything, including the phone cameras glinting like mechanical eyes. He turned to his mother, his gaze steady. "Mom, they think I'm strange again," he whispered, almost tenderly. Before she could respond, Mr. Graham stepped forward and placed his hand on Liam's shoulder. "Son," he said softly, "however you did that, it's remarkable." Liam tilted his head, thinking. "It's not remarkable," he answered. "It's obvious when you stop lying to yourself." The words landed like glass falling on marble. The room went quiet. Even the machines behind the counter seemed to stop their hum. Emma closed her eyes briefly, wishing she could pull those words back into safety. Outside, rain began to fall again, tapping against the window like impatient fingers. One by one, the audience drifted out, murmuring theories. Inside, Emma sat beside her son as Mr. Graham quietly wiped the board clean, his hands shaking slightly. No one mentioned the prediction again, yet the unease lingered, thick as humidity. Emma studied Liam's face, searching for any sign of pride, but all she saw was stillness. He didn't bask in attention. He simply existed beyond it. That night, as thunder rolled over the town, Emma found him sitting awake, staring out the window. His notebook lay beside him, open to a page covered with half-written numbers. "You shouldn't have done that," she said softly. He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was calm and strange. "I didn't do it for them," he whispered. "I did it because they needed to listen." There was no arrogance in his tone, only an eerie certainty that made her skin prickle with both love and fear. Days later, a journalist appeared at the cafe. A small-town columnist who'd heard the Miracle Boy story from a friend. She asked for an interview. Emma refused gently, but Liam simply said, "She'll write it anyway." Something in his calm frightened the woman enough to retreat. Still, the story appeared a week later, embellished but recognizable. The headline called him the quiet genius of Gresham. The article spread, carried by curiosity and the hunger for wonders that cost nothing. But beneath the growing fascination, Emma sensed danger. She recognized that pattern too. The cycle of attention, obsession, and eventual cruelty. The same people who laugh often end up worshipping next, only to destroy what they can't possess. One evening, after the story aired on local TV, she found someone watching their building from across the street. Just a silhouette under a street lamp, standing too still for too long, vanishing before she could look twice. Her chest tightened. Liam didn't mention it, though Emma was sure he saw it too. He became quieter over the following days, watching the world with a strange sadness that didn't belong to a teenager. Sometimes he smiled while reading people's faces, as if recognizing patterns in their fear, not their words. "Mom," he said one evening, "they're trying to be kind now, but kindness that comes after laughter always carries guilt." She froze. The way he said it, it wasn't bitterness. It was observation. As weeks passed, the world around them began to hum differently. Small-town curiosity turned to interviews, recordings, strangers leaving gifts. Emma tried to shield him, but she couldn't hush stories once they found a voice. Even Mr. Graham seemed changed, both protective and afraid. The cafe that once smelled of cinnamon now felt like a stage where something deeply human, deeply fragile was unfolding in slow motion. And deep inside, Emma began to sense that Liam's calm was only the surface of something far greater, something that might already be beyond her control. Emma woke before dawn, her body moving from habit rather than rest. The air was heavy, pressing against the window glass. Outside, Fog clung to the streetlights like wool. For a moment she watched the faint outline of her son through the half-open door. Liam sitting at his desk, motionless except for his fingers sliding across the pages of his notebook. He wasn't writing. He was tracing something already written, following invisible trails. When he noticed her, he closed the book gently and whispered, "It's getting louder." She wanted to ask what it was, but his eyes stopped her. Throughout the day, people treated her differently. The supermarket cashier smiled too long. A neighbor pretended coincidence when stopping her in the hall. Everyone spoke of pride, of how amazing Liam was. Emma nodded, grateful yet uneasy. She knew admiration often came before intrusion. The brain's chemistry didn't distinguish much between wonder and craving. It wanted to consume what fascinated it. That night, when she returned home from work, a letter waited under their door. No name, no return address. Just a single sentence. "We need to talk about your son." The following morning, as she walked Liam to school, she noticed the same car passing by twice. A black mid-sized sedan with tinted windows. Nothing happened. Yet everything in her body knew threat. The human mind was built for pattern recognition. Danger is detected long before proven. She tightened her grip on Liam's hand. He didn't look frightened. "They're watching to learn," he said softly, as if explaining the weather. "Not everyone looking wants to hurt us." His words should have comforted her. They didn't. By the end of the week, reporters began calling her phone. Some polite, others insistent. One asked whether Liam could demonstrate his process live. She hung up mid-sentence. That evening, Mr. Graham visited, carrying a box of pastries as peace offering. "Emma," he said quietly, "I think this has gone beyond us. People are sharing videos online. They think your boy can predict markets, weather, some crazy things." His voice broke at the last word, not from disbelief, but from awe. She nodded, already knowing. Viral attention had begun. At dinner, Liam barely ate. He just stared at his plate, moving the fork back and forth like a pendulum. "Mom," he said, "they think I see the future." She hesitated. "Do you?" He looked down. "Not the future, just the balance. When it breaks, I feel it." The simplicity of his tone made her heart ache. He wasn't talking about math. He was talking about humanity, the invisible currents of intention and consequence that most people ignore. Yet something inside her whispered that his calm understanding was too heavy for a boy to carry. Days stretched into patterns again. Phones rang less. People watched more from afar. A strange quiet hovered over town, like the pause between lightning and thunder. Emma tried to anchor herself in normalcy. Laundry, groceries, cleaning. But the ordinary refused to feel safe anymore. Her reflection in the mirror looked older, threads of gray visible under harsh light. She began speaking to herself quietly before bed, grounding rituals to keep anxiety from spinning into fear. Even as she whispered, she realized she was preparing for something she couldn't name. One afternoon, Mr. Graham called in distress. "You need to see this." When Emma arrived, the cafe was closed early. On the counter sat Liam's notebook. He must have left it there accidentally. Across 2 open pages, numbers repeated in perfect rhythm, looping endlessly like a heartbeat recorded in ink. Beneath them, a single line of handwriting read, "Tomorrow they will apologize." Mr. Graham frowned. For what? Emma couldn't answer. The sentence rattled in her mind like a quiet prophecy that refused to reveal its end. The next day, the apology came, unexpected and public. The same man who once mocked Liam during that first afternoon appeared on local television. His voice trembled as he spoke of judging what he couldn't understand, tears threatening, but never falling. The anchor called it a story of redemption. Emma watched, uneasy. Coincidence couldn't explain it. When she turned to Liam, He wasn't watching the screen. He was rewriting the same phrase over and over. Apologies come when silence grows too loud. After that broadcast, life blurred between concern and disbelief. Strangers sent letters of admiration. Others leaked cynical theories. Scientists debated online about whether formulas in Liam's notebook resembled predictive algorithms beyond known models. Emma didn't care about fame. She wanted her son's peace back. Quiet had become precious, rare like oxygen in thin air. But she couldn't stop the world from watching. You can't hide light once people learn it exists. Late one evening, someone knocked at their door. Not a neighbor. Someone wearing a suit, polite smile, government badge half hidden behind gentle manners. "Just a friendly conversation," he said. Emma hesitated but let him in. He spoke of opportunity, potential, programs for talented young minds. Liam listened silently, his gaze unwavering. "We study patterns," the man said with a soft grin. "Maybe your son could help us understand some." The air thickened. Emma's pulse raced, instinct screaming that curiosity cloaked in bureaucracy was still hunger. When the man left, Liam turned to her calmly. "He didn't ask about numbers," Liam said. "He asked about people." Emma froze. The subtle meaning of his words sank slowly into her mind like ink spreading on paper. She knew then that whatever force had been set in motion wasn't just fascination, it was extraction. They wanted something inside him, a thought, a formula, a gift too powerful or too mysterious to remain untouched. That night, Emma stood by the window long after midnight. Rain dripped steadily from rooftops, rhythm matching her heartbeat. Across the street the sedan returned, dark, still, waiting. And even though fear pressed like frost against her spine, a strange acceptance filled her chest. Liam had already felt this coming. He always did. What she didn't know yet was how far the world would go to learn what a boy like him could teach. Outside, thunder rolled closer. Inside, the notebook lay open on his desk again, its pages illuminated by dim lamplight. On the newest line, freshly written, were 4 quiet words that chilled her more than any storm ever could. "The test begins tomorrow." The storm arrived exactly at dawn, swallowing the town beneath sheets of rain that blurred everything beyond a few feet. Emma stood by the window, watching drops race down the glass, as if time itself were rushing somewhere she couldn't follow. Behind her, Liam sat at the table, silent, fingers resting on his notebook. He hadn't spoken since writing those 4 haunting words. When she asked what he meant by the test, he only said, "It's not theirs, it's ours." His calm voice carried no fear, but it chilled her more than thunder ever could. By mid-morning, her phone buzzed non-stop. Unfamiliar numbers. Emails from strangers claiming they could help manage Liam's potential. Offers to fund his education, to relocate them, to control the story. She deleted them all. But each message left a trace of unease, a digital fingerprint reminding her that privacy had quietly vanished. The brain, she knew, interprets intrusion as danger. Her entire nervous system lived in defense now. Every ringing phone felt like an alarm she couldn't silence. At noon, she decided to go back to the cafe, hoping for stability in its familiar smell of roasted coffee and sugar. The place was empty except for Mr. Graham, who looked older than before. "Emma," he said, voice trembling. "Something strange happened last night." He opened the cash register and unfolded a crumpled receipt. Yesterday's sales matched exactly what Liam wrote again, down to the penny. But we weren't even open the whole day. It shouldn't be possible. His eyes filled with reluctant fear. "Are you sure he's just gifted?" Emma wanted to defend her son instinctively, but the question stabbed into the one place logic had already abandoned her. Gifted? Yes, only gifted. She didn't know anymore. Human understanding has limits, and once reached, the brain fills the gap with either worship or terror. She didn't want either. She wanted her boy safe, not divine, not cursed, just safe. When she left the cafe, the rain had eased, but the world's hum beneath it felt louder, like 1,000 unseen eyes blinking in unison. That evening, Liam spent hours drawing circles that overlapped until they formed a spiral. "It's a test of balance," he murmured, while Emma watched from the doorway. When people change patterns too fast, something breaks. They want to measure the break. His tone was detached, almost clinical, yet his eyes were soft, filled with compassion. "Who's they?" she asked carefully. He frowned, as if that answer was too big for words. "The ones who think control is learning." As night deepened, power flickered across the apartment. Rain lashed harder against windows, thunder shaking the walls. The light above Liam's desk blinked once, twice, then steadied. Emma sat beside him, exhaustion carving shadows beneath her eyes. "You can tell me, sweetheart," she whispered. "Whatever happens tomorrow, we'll face it together." He nodded, but didn't meet her gaze. Instead, he closed the notebook carefully as though protecting something fragile inside it, then said softly, "You don't have to face it if you don't look." Sleep felt impossible. Every sound stretched into meaning. The distant hum of engines outside, the faint scrape of tires against wet pavement. All of it fed her spiraling unease. Memories long suppressed surfaced. The first time she realized Liam was different, the first teacher who called his quietness defiance, the countless apologies she delivered for things beyond his control. She'd always feared he would be judged. She'd never imagined he'd be studied. Before dawn, a knock shattered the silence, polite, firm, deliberate. When Emma opened the door, 2 individuals stood there, neither police nor press, dressed in plain clothes, eyes careful. "Mrs. Hale," the woman said warmly, "we're from the Department of Cognitive Research. We'd like to talk about your son's abilities." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "We'd prefer to discuss this privately." Behind her, the man carried a case. Metallic edges glinted faintly beneath the porch light. Emma froze. Every instinct screamed to send them away, but politeness and fear tangled her tongue. "He's asleep," she said. The woman's reply came too smoothly. "That's all right. We can wait." And the sound of those words, "we can wait," made Emma realize waiting was a trap disguised as patience. She closed the door gently but left the chain locked. Through the small gap she asked, "Are we required to?" The woman paused, smile never faltering. "Not yet." When she turned, Liam was standing behind her, notebook in hand. "They're not from research, Mom," he said quietly. His voice didn't shake. "They're here to test belief." Confusion tangled with fear. "Belief in what?" she whispered. He blinked slowly, eyes reflecting both storm and peace. "Belief that kindness can survive power." For a long moment, only the wind answered, rattling the windows in hollow rhythm. The knocking returned, louder now, 3 precise raps that echoed through the apartment. Emma's heart pounded, muscles coiled between panic and instinct. Liam looked utterly calm. "You don't have to open it," he said again, and this time his voice carried authority beyond his years. She believed him. The knocking stopped. Silence returned, thick as smoke. But in that silence, something shifted, like an invisible decision had just been made somewhere beyond their walls. Slowly, Liam opened his notebook, flipped past pages of numbers, and began writing new words. Each stroke was deliberate, gentle, final. When Emma leaned closer, she saw a sentence forming in neat handwriting. "The door doesn't guard us, it measures us." He closed the notebook, gaze distant. "Tomorrow," he murmured. "They'll realize the test isn't mine." Emma's breath caught. For the first time, she couldn't tell whether his calm meant safety or the quiet before collapse. Morning arrived heavy with silence, the kind that lingers before something irreversible happens. Emma prepared coffee with trembling hands, the scent filling their small kitchen but bringing no comfort. Liam sat at the table again, eyes lost somewhere beyond the physical world. He hadn't slept, but he didn't look tired either. Just still, unnervingly still. His notebook lay open between them, the ink from last night's message barely dry. "The door doesn't guard us. It measures us," she whispered aloud, as if reading it might change its meaning. He looked up slowly, eyes clear. It already did. Outside, the town moved in uneasy rhythm. The newspaper headlines spoke of government interest and potential misinformation. Reporters speculated whether Liam's predictions stemmed from hidden technology, advanced pattern recognition, or something more ethereal. Emma refused to turn on the TV, but she heard murmurs through thin apartment walls. Her pulse synced with every whispered conversation, each syllable of her son's name drugging her system with dread. Curiosity, she thought, is just fear pretending to be respect. Mid-morning brought an unexpected calm. The same sedan parked across the street, engine off, its presence almost gentle now. A predator that knew its prey had nowhere to run. Mr. Graham called to say he was closing the cafe indefinitely. "Too much attention," he said quietly. "But, Emma, last night I saw something." His voice trembled. "Before I locked up, the lights flickered, and on the blackboard were numbers, Liam's handwriting, but he wasn't there." She hung up before fear could bloom into panic. She turned toward Liam, her mouth dry. "You weren't at the cafe last night, were you?" He shook his head slowly. "Not with my body." The words struck her like cold wind. "Sometimes," he continued, "when people think about me, the patterns complete themselves. I don't control where they appear." Emma felt her chest tighten, the rational part of her brain clinging to denial, while another part, ancient and instinctive, began to believe. Understanding was a fragile mercy. It came at the price of peace. By afternoon, storm clouds gathered again. Liam stood by the window, fingertips pressed gently to the glass. "They'll come back soon," he said softly. "But this time, they'll ask different questions." Emma's throat burned. "What kind of questions?" He didn't turn, only exhaled. "Ones they don't want answers to." The sky cracked open with thunder as if punctuating his words. In that moment, he looked weightless, part of the storm itself, as if whatever he carried inside him was no longer bound by flesh and fear. That evening, Emma received another letter. No envelope, just a folded sheet slipped beneath the door. It contained a single line typed neatly in bold. "Your cooperation ensures his safety." Beneath it, an address scrawled by hand. The font was emotionless. The handwriting shook. Her hands trembled as she read it aloud, and Liam, listening from the next room, sighed gently. "They think safety means silence," he said, "but silence is their fear speaking." Those words shouldn't have made sense, yet they did. Later that night, when darkness consumed the town, she decided to confront whoever had sent the note. She almost woke Liam to come with her, but something inside warned against it. He wasn't supposed to face them, or maybe they weren't supposed to face him. So she walked alone through rain-slick streets, heart hammering, until she reached the address, a nondescript warehouse near the edge of town. A single light burned inside, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. When she stepped closer, a voice echoed from the shadows. "You're late, Mrs. Hale." The same woman from the previous night emerged, her expression restrained and empty. "We only want to understand him." Emma swallowed hard. "You can't," she said. "He doesn't work the way you think." The woman tilted her head slightly. "Then help us. What is he?" Emma hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's a mirror, and you're all standing too close." The woman's polite smile flickered for the first time. "Mirrors only reflect what's already there, Mrs. Hale. Are you suggesting we're the problem?" Emma took a slow step back, rainwater dripping from her hair. "That's exactly what he's showing you." For a fleeting moment, their eyes locked, two worlds orbiting an invisible gravity neither could control. The woman's hand tightened around the briefcase she carried. "Then you know," she said quietly, "that mirrors break." Emma returned home drenched, adrenaline mixing with dread. When she opened the door, she froze. Liam was gone. The apartment felt too quiet, too organized, as if he had left intentionally. On the table, his notebook lay open to a new page. The same spiral pattern stretched across it, but this time the lines didn't connect. In the center, a single sentence read, "They passed their own test." Her heart thrummed painfully. Passed? What did that mean? Moments later, a faint hum filled the air. Electrical, rhythmic. The lights dimmed, then pulsed back brighter than before. Emma's reflection flickered in the window, but something was wrong. Her reflection wasn't moving like she was. It smiled, slowly. The glass caught the tremor in her breath, amplifying it until she couldn't tell which version of herself truly belonged to the room. Behind her, the notebook pages rustled without wind, as if invisible hands were turning them over. She turned slowly, eyes wide, reaching for the book. The final page fluttered free and landed near her feet. Ink gleamed wet under lamplight, the newest line still forming even though no pen touched it. "Don't be afraid. I'm only showing them what love looks like." Emma's knees weakened as thunder rolled outside again, and for a moment, she forgot how to breathe. Somewhere, unseen, Liam was still writing, and the world, unwillingly, had begun to read. The night stretched endless, stitched together by the faint hum that never truly stopped. Emma hadn't moved from the table since finding Liam's last message. The world outside the window blurred into reflection. Rain turned streets into mirrors. Every instinct told her to run. But where could she go from something that existed both inside and beyond her? On the table, the notebook glimmered faintly, its edges pulsing like a heartbeat. She whispered his name once. The sound vanished into the hum, swallowed whole. Morning came unkind. Pale sunlight bled through the thin curtains, turning everything a sick shade of gold. Emma tried calling every number she could think of. Friends, the school, even Mr. Graham, but all lines returned the same emptiness. "We don't know anything." Her voice cracked more with every attempt, and each unanswered ring became proof of a quiet conspiracy she couldn't name. The mind, she reminded herself, invents order when lost in chaos. Still, some part of her knew this pattern wasn't imagined. Then faintly, a knock. Not at the door, at the window. Her heart lunged, fingers trembling as she lifted the curtain. There he was. Standing in the rain, soaked, still, eyes bright, but unreadable. Liam. Relief hit like lightning. She rushed to open the window, nearly slipping on the floor. "You're freezing," she breathed, pulling him close. But he didn't resist or shiver. His skin felt warm, too warm. He looked at her with new stillness. "They learned what they needed," he said quietly. "Now they're afraid." She stepped back. "Who's afraid?" He tilted his head, as if listening to something distant. "Everyone who looked too close." His calm was unbearable. It was beyond fear, beyond emotion, as though he had crossed some invisible line no one else could see. "Did they hurt you?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, Mom. They tried to measure me, but I showed them something they couldn't count." His smile was faint, strange. Not joy, not triumph. Almost mourning. Throughout the day, Liam barely spoke. He moved through rooms like someone remembering how to exist, touching familiar objects, the chipped cup, the cracked tile, the faded photo of Emma holding him as a boy. Each touch felt like farewell. Emma followed silently, sensing the distance thickening though he stood only steps away. Human brains, she thought, resist loss before it happens. Denial is nature's anesthesia. But her body knew better. Something irreversible had already begun. By afternoon, the town seemed to pause. News spread of sudden blackouts across nearby cities, grids collapsing briefly, data systems failing, unexplained flickers in satellite feeds. Some called it a cyber attack, others a coordinated test. But Emma saw a pattern. "You did this?" she whispered as they watched faint static play across the TV. Liam didn't look surprised. "It wasn't an attack," he said softly. "It was a reflection. They only saw themselves." Later, a new letter slid under their door. Not typed, not threatening, handwritten, trembling. "We're sorry. We shouldn't have tried. No signatures. Just that." Emma folded it wordlessly. Forgiveness usually brings peace. This one brought none. Outside, the sedan was gone, street empty except for puddles reflecting a clean sky. Yet the air felt charged, heavy with aftermath. When she turned to speak to Liam, he was staring upward as though listening to something only he could hear. "They left," he murmured, "but they're still searching." That evening, as sunlight died in slow streaks across the sky, he opened his notebook again. But instead of numbers, he drew shapes, hearts, circles, delicate lines intertwined like veins. "What is it?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "A map." "To where?" she pressed. "To peace," he said. "Not for me. For them." She didn't understand, not fully, but he sounded so certain it made her eyes sting. Sometimes faith doesn't need proof. It only needs tone. Night fell again, cloaking everything in fragile quiet. Emma dozed off on the couch, exhaustion finally stealing her guard. When she woke, the living room glowed faintly. The notebook lay open on the table, pages flipping on their own, untouched wind stirring the air. In the center of the page, fresh ink scrolled in real time. "Love rewrites what fear erases." Her chest ached. The message pulsed like breath between worlds. Somewhere behind her, a door creaked softly open. She turned, heart pounding. Liam stood in the doorway, calm as ever, light brushing his shoulders like mist. "Mom," he said gently. "Nothing was taken. It was just returned." "Returned," she whispered, stepping closer. "What was?" He smiled, eyes glinting with something infinite and tender. Their humanity. Her knees weakened as tears blurred her vision. She didn't fully grasp what he meant, but she felt it. An invisible warmth spreading through the room, softening the air itself. Outside, the wind calmed. One by one, lights across the town flickered back on, steady, almost synchronized, as if the storm never happened. Emma stood silently beside him, afraid to speak, afraid to break whatever fragile balance he had restored. "Are you okay?" she finally asked. Liam looked up at her, expression light, free of weight for the first time. "Yes," he said. "But they won't understand yet." Then, turning toward the window, he whispered, "That's why we have to go." Emma's voice caught. "Go where?" But he didn't answer. He simply placed the notebook in her hands. It felt warm, pulsing faintly with his heartbeat. On the last page, a single line glowed beneath the lamplight. "The journey continues when silence is kind." She looked up, but Liam no longer stood by the window. The curtain swayed slightly, touched by wind from nowhere. And for the first time in her life, Emma felt both terror and grace breathing in the same room. Below the distant thunder, faint laughter echoed, soft, childlike, fading into air too still to carry sound. The notebook's pages turned once more, ink forming new words as if the story were still unfolding somewhere unseen. The reflection never ends. It learns. Morning broke with a strange, shimmering calm. The light that spilled across the small apartment looked almost weightless, bending softly around objects, as if reality itself had exhaled. Emma woke to silence so pure it frightened her. The couch still held the imprint of her restless sleep, and beside it, the notebook rested exactly where she'd left it, closed this time, but a faint warmth still radiated from its cover. She whispered his name before she even realized it, the syllables trembling like fragile glass. Liam? No answer. Only the hum of electricity returning to normal. She stood slowly, calling him again, louder this time. His room was neat, bed made, curtains drawn wide. The desk where he used to write stood empty except for a single folded sheet of paper. Her breath hitched as she opened it. One line, simple, patient. I'll be where kindness is still learning to speak. The handwriting was steady, gentle, as if written without sadness. Emma's knees weakened. It wasn't a goodbye. It was a relocation, to a place only he could find. All day the world outside buzzed with contradictory truths. News anchors spoke of unexplained grid resets and a mysterious disappearance. Some called it divine, others blamed technology. No one could agree on what had happened. But people everywhere began writing words on windows, in dirt, on cafe tables, phrases about love, patience, balance. It was as if Liam's voice had woven itself into the world's nervous system, rewriting language from within. Emma watched strangers speaking softly to each other for no reason they could name. In the afternoon, she returned to the cafe. Dust covered the tables now, but warmth lingered in the air like an invisible residue. Mr. Graham was there too, standing by the counter, his eyes red from sleepless nights. When he saw her, he didn't speak at first, just pointed toward the blackboard. Across it, written in simple white chalk, stood the same sentence from Liam's note. I'll be where kindness is still learning to speak. But beneath it, a new line shimmered faintly, as if written in light. Thank you for listening. Emma sat down at their old table, hands trembling around a cup of untouched coffee. The chair across from her remained empty, but she could almost feel his presence in the air. The stillness that once unnerved her now wrapping around her like safety. The human brain, she remembered reading once, processes absence the same way it processes pain. Yet this absence didn't ache. It glowed. Somewhere deep inside, the fear she had carried for years began dissolving, one breath at a time. As days turned into weeks, she noticed change in the town itself. People treated each other differently, slightly more patient, quicker to smile. The cafe reopened, no longer just a cafe but a quiet refuge for those who felt the hum, as some called it. Emma began working there, cleaning tables, organizing shelves, watching strangers leave small folded notes behind, messages of forgiveness, of gratitude, of second chances. Every note started the same way. To whoever understands balance. Late one evening, as she wiped the counter, Mr. Graham handed her a small box he'd found behind the register. Thought you might want this, he said. Inside was Liam's old notebook, its cover now cold to the touch. When she opened it, she found the pages blank, completely blank, not erased, reborn. He's still writing, Mr. Graham murmured, eyes distant. Just somewhere else. She smiled faintly, feeling tears rise but not fall. He was right. The silence between pages wasn't emptiness, it was continuation. Time softened everything except memory. Emma began noticing subtle patterns that reminded her of him. Children tracing circles in playground dust, a whisper of numbers spoken unconsciously by an old woman waiting for the bus, even the rhythmic tapping of rain against windows. Steady, coded, familiar. Each repetition felt like his way of saying, I'm still here. It was as if the world had become his larger notebook, every heartbeat and word a new equation balancing joy and sorrow. Months later, a letter arrived addressed to the mother of patterns. Inside was no signature, just a small photograph of a mural painted on a wall in another state. It showed a boy's silhouette surrounded by spirals of light, reaching toward an open sky. Beneath it, a phrase glowed faintly in gold paint. Silence is not the absence of sound. It's the beginning of understanding. Emma pressed the photograph to her chest, breathing in the quiet ache of pride and wonder. That night, dream and reality blurred. She dreamed of walking through fields of light, each blade of grass whispering fragments of laughter. And there he was, Liam, standing beside her. Older, maybe, but the same steady calm in his eyes. "You see, Mom," he said softly. "They're learning." When she reached for him, her hand passed through a shimmer of warmth that felt like sunlight underwater. "Will I see you again?" she asked. He smiled. "You already do." Emma woke with tears streaking her cheeks. The morning light shimmered through the window like it had learned to breathe differently. She stood, realizing the hum was gone at last. The world was just the world again, beautiful, imperfect, alive. Still, when she turned toward the table, the notebook waited, open to a new page, the faintest line appearing in real time as if drawn by invisible hands. Never forget. Every kindness rewrites the world. The ink shimmered once, then stilled. Emma smiled through her tears, whispering into the gentle morning air, "I won't." Outside, the first rays of sunrise poured across the wet street, and for a moment she could almost see him in the light, walking barefoot across reflection, calm, infinite, carrying a world that was finally ready to listen. The following morning began like a held breath. Too long, too still. Emma sat by the window with her usual cup of coffee, though it had long gone cold. The world outside felt both ordinary and altered, as if the edges between days no longer aligned perfectly. Birds perched on the wires across the street, chirping in disharmony, almost hesitant. She found herself whispering good morning to no one, and to something at the same time. On the table, Liam's notebook remained open, its last sentence faintly shimmering, as though alive beneath thin light. When she touched the page, a warmth pulsed once through her fingertips, a heartbeat disguised as ink. She drew a shaky breath and said out loud, "You're still here, aren't you?" The silence that followed wasn't empty, it listened. Somewhere inside her, neurons sparked old echoes of his laughter, his calm voice, his peculiar cadence when explaining impossible truths. The human brain, she thought, can reanimate love as memory. But this felt different. This felt reciprocal. "You never left," she murmured. By mid-afternoon, the cafe filled again for the first time in months. Locals gathered, not for gossip, but for quiet, the kind of quiet that mended rather than judged. Emma refilled cups of coffee, smiling gently at customers who avoided saying Liam's name, yet spoke him into being through their softened tones. On the wall above the counter, Mr. Graham had framed Liam's last written line from the blackboard. "Love rewrites what fear erases." It glowed faintly under the morning sun, as if light itself agreed. Then something strange happened. A little girl, no older than 7, entered the cafe holding a crumpled napkin. Her mother waited outside, distracted on her phone. The child approached the counter, eyes wide with innocent certainty. "Are you the lady whose son listens to numbers?" she asked. Emma's breath caught. She knelt gently to meet the girl's eyes. "He used to," she said softly. The little girl smiled. "He still does. He helped me sleep." She unfolded the napkin, a spiral of uneven circles drawn in blue ink. Emma stared, heart trembling, throat tight. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. The child pointed outside. "In the clouds last night. Mom said it was just lightning, but it wasn't. It was him drawing." Logic rebelled, but emotion overrode it. Children see what adults rationalize away. Their pattern recognition isn't dulled yet by disbelief. Emma smiled, eyes burning. "Keep it safe," she said. "It means kindness." The girl nodded solemnly, folding the napkin again before leaving. The imprint of the spiral remained lit in Emma's mind long after she was gone. Later that evening, as the cafe emptied, a stranger entered. A woman Emma didn't recognize, though her eyes carried familiar exhaustion, the kind born from years of protecting something fragile. She sat alone at a corner table and began crying quietly. Emma brought her tea without asking. "It's hard, isn't it?" she said gently. The woman looked up, startled. "What is?" "Loving someone the world misunderstands." The woman's lip trembled. Then she nodded, pressing a trembling hand to her mouth as if afraid emotion itself might spill out. As the woman wept, Emma realized this was her next calling, not to search for Liam, but to guide others like her, others still caught between fear and faith. Maybe that's why he left, to create ripples, not monuments. Every person she would comfort, every child seen and understood, became another line written in his invisible notebook. She looked toward the framed sentence again, the words now glimmering gently like a living vow. The story, she understood, was still writing itself, in hearts instead of pages. Weeks passed, yet small miracles stitched themselves quietly through normal life. Appliances hardly broke anymore. Strangers apologized before arguing. People began pausing to listen without planning their next words. Subtle shifts, unmeasurable, yet undeniable. The cafe's new chalkboard bore a simple question at the top each morning. "Where did you notice kindness today?" Customers filled the space beneath it daily, until chalk dust blurred words into soft constellations of gratitude. One afternoon, while closing, Emma found a folded scribble left under a cup. Her fingers hesitated before opening it. Inside was a familiar handwriting, steady, balanced, unmistakable. "You're doing what I couldn't. You're teaching them to listen, without needing proof." Her mind froze, but her heart didn't. She smiled quietly through tears. "You always did love your lessons, didn't you?" she whispered to the page. Outside, the light flickered momentarily. Not electric failure, but recognition. Night crept in gently, carrying wind scented with rain. Emma sat by the same window where their story had started, the city below reflecting faint gleams of balanced life. For the first time, fear felt useful, a reminder of everything she had survived. She understood now what Liam meant. The real test was never about numbers or patterns. It was about endurance, the human capacity to remain kind, even while shattering. That realization rooted itself deep inside her chest, growing steady and alive. Before she went to bed, she placed the notebook back on the windowsill. It no longer glowed. It didn't need to. The lesson had already left the page. She whispered goodnight and turned away, unaware that the faintest writing had begun etching itself across the final margin. "When love learns quiet, truth can breathe." The ink shimmered once and faded. Outside, wind carried that line across rooftops and fields, where perhaps another mother, somewhere else, would one day find her own reflection within it. And though the world would soon forget the boy who taught through silence, its people, without knowing why, would pause each time they were about to speak in anger and feel deep down a voice whispering, "You can choose kindness instead." And in that invisible choice, Liam would live forever. Excellent. This continuation will serve as topic 10, the emotional and philosophical closing arc. I will follow the same voice, pacing, tone, and depth, but each paragraph will be approximately double the length of the earlier ones to create a more immersive and cinematic flow, maintaining the same narrative gravity and neuropsychological writing rhythm. Emma's mornings no longer began with alarm clocks or worry. They began with intention. The sun would spill slowly over the window pane, seeping through the soft curtains and painting the kitchen with the color of quiet gold. She would stand for minutes listening to the small sounds of life, the kettle creaking, the hum of the refrigerator, the rustle of leaves outside as if the world were breathing in sync with her. It took her months to relearn the art of stillness, to unlearn the reflex of scanning for pain the moment she opened her eyes. Healing, she discovered, wasn't about forgetting him. It was about rearranging the emptiness he left so it could hold something lighter. Each morning she'd speak softly into the empty space. "Liam, you'd love how peaceful it is today." And the silence would respond like a living thing. The cafe had become her second home, but also something larger, a quiet network of hearts learning how to listen again. People came not for coffee, but for echoes. Some to whisper apologies written years too late, others to trace hope onto napkins and leave them behind, knowing someone would read them. Emma arranged those notes into a small box beside the counter. Over time, thousands accumulated, each one a fragment of human fragility rediscovered. She often spent her evenings reading them when the shop closed, her fingers covered in faint chalk dust. Patterns revealed themselves, sentences repeating across hands that never met. Different people writing the same realization in their own words. Kindness doesn't need witnesses to exist. When she saw that, her breath caught. Liam hadn't vanished. He'd multiplied. Sometimes late at night, the chalkboard near the counter would glow faintly. Words would appear faintly in the dust without anyone standing near it. Once, in delicate handwriting, it spelled, "You're keeping the rhythm alive." It frightened her at first, because it blurred the line between coincidence and visitation, but gradually she stopped needing to decide which it was. The mind conditioned by grief tries to divide dream from real, but the heart refuses. That gentle defiance became her freedom. She didn't care whether it was miracle or metaphor. It was proof that love never dies of silence. It only changes frequency. One Sunday morning, a man walked into the cafe carrying a violin case. He looked exhausted, cheeks hollow from sleepless nights. "Are you the woman who used to talk about that boy?" he asked quietly. Emma nodded. He sat down and confessed that he had been one of the scientists who tried to measure what was unmeasurable. He said Liam had visited his dreams for weeks after the disappearance, showing him sound waves as colors, teaching through silence. "I thought I was losing my mind," he whispered. "Then I started composing." He took out his violin and played for her. The melody was haunting, not sad, but infinite, spiraling like numbers dissolving into light. She cried openly, not from grief, but from awe. It felt like hearing her son speak again, only through another's breath. As the month stretched into a year, the hum that once haunted her changed tone. It wasn't fear anymore. It was belonging. The town itself transformed. Once bitter strangers now greeted each other with nods that carried small forgivenesses. People shared umbrellas during sudden rain. Children left painted spirals on sidewalks in chalk. Patterns everywhere. Symmetry reborn, not from logic, but from empathy. Emma saw them all and felt his pulse within every gesture. The nervous system, she realized, was a map of memory. Every good act lit synapses that resembled constellations, linking hearts like neurons of the same organism. Humanity, perhaps, was just beginning to wire itself back together through kindness. Still, quiet moments could ambush her. The smell of cinnamon in the cafe, the hollow sound of thunder rolling through distant hills. Those moments cracked open her old fear of losing him again, but instead of resisting, she leaned into it. She'd close her eyes and imagine him standing beside her, head tilted, explaining calmly that all endings were just patterns pausing for breath. The brain's chemistry obeyed rhythm more than reason. She began to understand grief that way, a beat replaced by another, softer one. The ache no longer consumed, it instructed. Pain itself had become her instrument of retention, proof that love had mattered enough to hurt. One evening, while cleaning after closing, Emma noticed the reflection of candlelight dancing on the cafe's window. For a second, it looked like Liam's silhouette mirrored back at her. the familiar curve of his shoulders, the stillness, the calm gravity that used to fill rooms. But instead of fear, it evoked peace. Her reflection smiled before she did, as though his presence now lived behind her eyes. People often said ghosts were remnants of regret, but Liam felt like the opposite, an echo of completion. He had left, not because he was gone, but because his purpose had expanded beyond visibility. That realization finally loosened the last thread of her sorrow. One morning, she found a small envelope waiting on the doorstep. The handwriting was elegant and strangely familiar, steady, deliberate. Inside was a folded program from a youth music competition hosted in another state. The winning composition was titled, "Patterns of Grace." On the back page, under acknowledgements, one line glowed faintly in embossed gold. "Inspired by a quiet boy who taught the world to listen." She pressed the paper to her heart, laughing and crying all at once. The story had already escaped her hands, and perhaps that was what he always wanted. In time, psychologists began referencing the echo phenomenon, cases of communities showing measurable empathy spikes after exposure to the story of Liam Hale. They debated whether it was coincidence or contagion of emotion. Emma read the articles, but never commented. She always smiled at the irony of science studying something meant to be felt, not proven. Liam had once told her that truth and kindness shared one law: both vanish the moment you try to own them. He was right. People could analyze forever. They would never replicate the gentle mechanism of his silence. Years passed. The cafe became a sanctuary marked with drawings of spirals from travelers who'd heard whispers of its story. Some brought children who struggled to speak, hoping quiet air might comfort them. Others came just to sit. Emma grew older, hair silvering at the edges, but her presence never dimmed. Often she'd look up from baking and catch customers watching her, not with curiosity but reverence. The same look she once saw in Mr. Graham's eyes when Liam made numbers speak truth. And each time she whispered inwardly, "Keep listening," knowing he could hear through every act of mercy carried onward. One distant evening, years later, the cafe lights dimmed gently on their own, though no switch had been touched. A breeze drifted through the door, carrying the familiar hum that had followed her through so much of life. Emma smiled knowingly. "You can come in," she whispered to the air. The shutters rattled softly, responding. On her counter rested a single cup, one she hadn't placed there. Steam curled from its surface, tracing spirals in the air. A soft glow illuminated the notebook, still kept behind the register. When she opened it this time, instead of ink, words formed in light. "You did it, Mom." They heard. She pressed her palm to the glowing page, tears slipping down her cheeks as warmth traveled into her skin. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling but proud. "We did." The letters flickered once, then faded, leaving emptiness that didn't ache. It felt like breath finishing a song. Somewhere, unseen, a child across town would dream of a calm boy drawing circles made of light, and a woman would wake with sudden peace without knowing why. The current had moved onward, beyond names, beyond proof. As dawn approached, Emma watched the sky bloom from violet to pale gold, the same shade that once poured across their old kitchen table. The hum faded completely. The world was quiet again, but it was a compassionate quiet, wide and alive. She closed the cafe for the last time, leaving the key beneath the door, and walked toward the horizon with a slow, certain grace. She didn't know where she was going, but for the first time she didn't need to. Liam's voice, or something like it, lingered softly in her chest. "Every pattern returns to light, Mom. You just have to follow the warmth." The wind lifted faintly around her as if nodding in agreement. She smiled, eyes glistening as morning light wrapped around her shoulders like an old, forgiving friend. Somewhere inside that brightness, maybe in the space between heartbeat and thought, the pattern continued. One mother, one son, one echo of love that would never end. Humanity would keep writing it long after names were forgotten, each act of kindness completing another invisible circle. And that, she realized, was how eternity begins. Not with perfection, but with the decision to care. If this story touched your heart, if you've ever felt misunderstood, judged unfairly, or struggled just to be seen, remember, you're not alone. Somewhere out there, someone like Emma is fighting quietly for someone like Liam every single day. So take a moment to keep this message alive. Click subscribe, leave your like, and share your thoughts below. Tell me, have you ever seen kindness change a life when the world least expected it? Your story might be the spark someone else needs right now.